Let's call this meeting to order, please. It is Thursday, June 11th, shortly after 8 a.m. And welcome everybody to our early morning meeting. We have, you already have seen the agenda, and we're going to carry out conduct of review of applications. Then we'll examine the guidelines at application form, and finally, our schedule and other business that may come up. So, Mr. Lucas, would you like to call the roll?
Sure. Councilmember Sims?
Yes, or here. I'm sorry.
Committee member Sims. McKim?
Here.
Scamboluri?
Here.
Oldham?
Here.
Munson?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Piedmont Smith?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Our first item of business is reviewing the applications and according to the statute and how we are going to handle this. And do you want to have a discussion of the expected revenue coming in from the local income tax first? Because this is relevant to our procedures, and also a discussion of the schedule that the state has set for us. Hopefully we have new information.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know, if there's anything new.
Mr. Lucas.
I can give an update on what information I've got, although I saw Jeff Underwood also indicate he has something to add. But I've been in contact with Fred Van Dorp at the DLGF. I got an email from him this morning that says they do not have an answer for us. Apparently they had a meeting on our question and conundrum yesterday. He said the meeting was productive, but he didn't have a resolution for us at the moment. The question I posed to him was simply that with the extension of the dates for the state budgeting agency to provide estimates and certifications back to September and then even farther, I pointed out that our deadlines of before July 1st and before September 1st could be impacted without knowing what money there is. So he understood the question. He said that they are talking about it. So I don't know when. I asked him when he might have an answer for us, and he didn't know. So unfortunately, I don't have more information. I don't know if Jeff has anything else to add.
No, I was hoping that I was hoping that they'd have something before now. I don't have anything.
Yeah, we checked with through council, and they talk to the DLGF on a regular basis. Not enough coffee, sorry. And because we asked a related question was, are you going to move all the deadlines? So not only for work we're doing here, but for units of government on budgets. And they said no, that they had not contemplated moving any of the deadlines other than the tax revenues estimates, because in order to get everything certified with budget orders by the end of the year, that if they moved that out any further, they wouldn't be able to accomplish that. Now, my comment was, yeah, it's nice. It's nice. They don't have a problem taking time out of our schedules, but they always have a problem when it impacts them. And the governor could just as easily say, hey, you're not going to get your certified budget orders till, we're going to move that date by 2 months. But the word is coming straight from the DLGF that they are not going to consider and have not considered moving any of the other deadlines other than what the governor's announced. So I think we're kind of stuck with not having a good idea of what we're going to get. If you use what the DLGF tells you every year, for those of you who have been through these wonderful little hearings that they have with field staff, is, well, use 90% of what you got last year. And they do that. So you're sitting there trying to figure out what kind of revenues am I really going to have. And the only guidance that you get is 90% of last year. So that's my update.
So thank you, Mr. Underwood. last evening, I talked with Jeff McKim about the schedule of income tax payments and revenue receipts. And he put together something that I thought was very helpful. Jeff, would you be able to share that with the committee this morning?
Yeah, sure. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Let's see if this is it. Oh. I apologize. It's going to quit Zoom.
He was right.
It knocked him off. Let me see if I can share his screen. Not his screen. Oh, I have two monitors here, and it's totally confused. Technical difficulties. It worked, kind of. Is that visible to you now?
Yes.
Yes,
ma'am.
Cheryl, hello.
Hello.
Oh, okay, can you hear me now? Cheryl, I have an updated version. So sorry,
I'll close that.
Yeah, I had to disappear to let it share my screen. All right. Okay, so does everybody see this now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I tried to put on all relevant dates here with the new alignment. So
That was
we're
good.
in the 2021 lit cycle right now. So the income that is earned was from the calendar year 2019. Taxes, the tax returns are then processed anytime from the July 1st, 2019, all the way now to September or August 31st of 2020 per the new alignment, and then that money gets distributed to us in 2021 throughout the year in 12 equal payments. The 2022 cycle is now where the financial hit from the pandemic economy is going to affect us most, because those tax returns are then going to be processed in the beginning of 2021 for 2020 income, and then those will be distributed in 2022. Now, there is a legitimate question about, even given the 3-month extension of the tax deadline for 2019's returns, there still may be some people who are simply unable to pay, and so will file late or won't file at all because of COVID-related financial situations. But that would be what the hit we would see in 2021 would simply be. It would not be from the pandemic economy in terms of earnings in 2020. It would just simply be people that, even despite a 3-month extension, just simply can't file their tax or don't file their tax returns. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I tried to
helpful.
include all the relevant dates on here, including the new estimate and certification dates that we received.
Is it possible committee members can get a copy of this? That's
Sure,
very helpful.
Yeah,
It's very helpful.
Yes, I'll email it to Stephen and he can distribute it.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, if it's okay, Stephen.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, Cheryl.
No, that's good.
Jeff Underwood mentioned that as an estimate, you could use 90% of last year. Is that something we'll be working with moving forward, or will we just proceed and kind of wait later to see what the actual projections are from the state?
I'll answer that. Two things. One to follow up. Thanks, Jeff, for putting that together.
Yes.
Just to remind everybody, lit is also unusual in that once they certify the distribution, you are guaranteed that for that fiscal calendar year. So they do keep in reserve taxes collected. So there's a reserve on hand for every unit of government throughout the state that the state holds on to. That way, if collections fall short, once they guarantee you that amount, you go ahead and get that. So you see that delay by a year in a lot of cases if there is a drop. So that's the nice thing about the reserve, is that they do keep enough money back to make sure that units of government can be guaranteed they're going to get those distributions. Yeah, I mean, on two fronts, Commissioner, Councilmember Sims, is that one, yeah, as you can see from the chart, you're not going to have the information available to you in order to make decisions about this committee. So you're not going to have those revenues. So basically the range is 90% of last year to, if you want to say, okay, we're not going to have any impacts of COVID in 2021. What's the growth been in the prior years? So you may be looking at a 2 to 3% increase in those distributions. So I would say that's the range. And Jeff, you can jump in. I see you shaking your head. So yeah. I'd say we're talking somewhere between 90% to 102, 103% of last year's amounts being available to us. And then for those of us that deal with budgets, which is all of you, is we aren't even going to have really good estimates by the time we pass our budgets, because the city will do a late September public hearing and a passage in early October. We always reserve one full council cycle in the event that something happens, like the paper for, there's an error of some kind. That gives us one more cycle for council review and approval that gets us by the deadline of, I believe it's November 3rd this year. I can look it up. It varies because of the holiday or because of the weekends. But anyway, even we're not going to have good estimates of what we're going to get for 21. So I know for all of us, Ellisville City, Steinsville, and the county is lit revenues are significant in funding our budget. So it's unfortunate that they're not going to give us any leeway on having that information. I applaud them for moving it. It does move the problem out another year, which gives us another year to plan for it. But it makes it awful difficult for us to do good budgeting projections if you don't have good estimates.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oldham has a question.
I do.
Please.
Thank you very much. Jeff, what did the growth quotient wind up being for last year, if you can remind us? What did it finalize out at?
If you'll give, I'll pull that up. I think it was, I think last year was a pretty significant growth, which was a kind of an outlier because we ended up getting more money than we thought. But I'll take a look. We've got that. I'll pull it up unless Jeff's got it. Or actually, Stephen, have you got the exhibit that shows the, I think it goes all the way back to like 16.
Yes, if you give me a second, I can try to figure that out as well.
Well, I guess my question, and it's not fully formed, so forgive me. Do we have any idea for the first 3 months of the year, were we tracking similar to last year, or were we significantly below? Do we have any way of knowing?
Well, once they certify it, it's a guaranteed amount, so it won't change.
No, I do get that. I'm just trying to project in my head what the loss is likely to be in 22, or at least have some idea what that is. Because again, this whole question of what do we set now, what do we give the certified providers, et cetera, still is hanging out there for me. And what's the safe play as opposed to how we've done it in the past?
Well, you know, my stance on it is that we just give it to the 4 units, and if they want to distribute further. But I would say, from a budgeting perspective, we would probably, since it's not going to be known, we'll probably go with 100% of last year.
Okay, that's where I wanted. That was my question.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah, I don't think we'll show any growth in the lit since we don't know, so we'll probably flatline it.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Mr. McKim?
Yeah, I guess I would say the same thing for us. I think at this point, at least I'm thinking 2021 is going to be flat. And, I think in the council, we've been talking about maybe a 25% decrease in 2022. That may be high. I mean, that may be a conservative estimate, and we'll just have to see how quick or what the numbers start to look like as people go back to work. But, I think for our just initial thinking, we're at least we're thinking a 25% decrease is at least possible for 2022.
Mm-hmm. Other questions or comments?
Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like there was just under a 5% increase from 20
That's a lot.
in last year's revenues. I don't know if Jeff, if that sounds right to you.
I know, yeah, because I think we were projecting a 2 or 3%. It came in at 5. Sounds about right.
You're talking about lit, right?
Lit.
Right.
Yeah, because it looks like the levy growth that I think was requested is 3.5.
Right. Yeah. And I think we'll probably see about the same growth in the levy for this coming year, because unfortunately, we were getting ready to drop off the last year of the last recession. Again, it's a 7-year rolling average of non-farm income across the state. So we all get the same levy quotient, but then we're going to add probably a bad year to that. So we think that, we'll have about 3.5% in property taxes, and then what 2022 holds is another question.
Yeah, here I just put up the levy growth calculations for this year, and that just like Jeff said there's that 0.08, essentially a 0 year is going to be dropping off. So yeah, it's fortunately high. It won't be that harmful to have another bad year added on, or at least it won't be as harmful since we're dropping off a bad year.
And just to give you echoing back with Jeff's estimates, if you remember from the last meeting, if we have a 25% loss for 4 months, that's about a little over $700,000. 50% would be $1,442,000, and a 75% drop would be $2.163 million, and that's for 4 months. So we're kind of going that April, May, June, July, thinking things will kind of come back. Starting in July, but that August would be a more normal number.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments?
I just, I do want to put in just a pitch for providing some funding for the local fire departments. I recognize that city staff doesn't recommend that, but I think the numbers that we'll see will at least justify providing some kind of allocation to the fire departments. And I think, we're all, especially now, we're all thinking very broadly about what public safety means. And I think that firefighting throughout the county is, I think it's very clearly an important public safety need. And the other thing is that our local fire departments have really done a good job, I think, of consolidating and working together to improve their efficiency. And so I think that's something I know that people on this committee have requested before, that the rural fire departments work together. And I think we've seen examples of that. So just want to make that point.
Ms. Piedmont Smith?
I tend to agree that I would want to give some percentage to the qualified service providers outside the city of Bloomington. However, what Mr. McKim said as far as consolidation, and that they've done a good job, addressing a concern that we had a few years ago about, so many different small departments. The flip side of that is that they have a chance to reset their tax rates to fully fund those departments. So we should encourage them to do that.
Thank you. I want to make a comment in this regard, because there are multiple township-based fire departments that are not part of the consolidation and will not be in 2021. And I think you should know which ones these are. These are Washington, Bean Blossom, Richland, and Benton, excuse me. And Benton for now. It's possible Benton will change before the end of the year, but there's no way I can know that, that schedule.
I think that Washington and Benton would be 2022 based on the schedule, because
Right,
Bloomington Township and Washington Township had to decouple.
right,
Then Bloomington has to act, then Washington Township can act, and then Benton can act. So I think Washington and Benton will be the last two that'll come in on 2022. I know that I live in
Right.
Benton County or Benton Township, and all the indications are they're going to move into the fire protection district as well.
yes. They already have resident responses to the question going out, and they're doing another round of information from residents as to what they support. So
Do you know if they've,
Go ahead, Jeff.
well, I was just going to ask you, do you know if they've rescheduled the public meetings? I know the public meetings have been canceled because of the pandemic, but I don't know if they've been rescheduled or not.
I do not know that.
Yeah, Benton's, I don't believe they have, because I've not seen anything come through.
Okay, yeah, you would have as a resident.
So I think just for information, then I'll recognize you, Mr. Smith. Benton had to go through a 2-request process for township resident signatures and approvals. And another postcard is going out to Benton residents. So there is movement on this. So Mr. Smith, your question, please.
Thank you, Chairperson Munson. What I'm going to ask is, what is the advantage of, or what is the disadvantage of not allocating the funds and having kind of a situation where the townships are forced to increase their tax levy? Can somebody kind of speak about that a little bit? That what is the advantage or disadvantage and the impact to us with the PS lit?
I guess I'll take the disadvantage side, is that the way the statute's set up is that from a public safety lit, it was initially set up to fund local PSAPs, dispatch centers. That was the impetus for it. They wanted to have consolidated dispatch centers in every county. So it goes first to fund dispatch, and then it falls to the 4 municipalities: Steinsville, Ellisville, Monroe County, and the city of Bloomington. And based on that, we have the ability under the statute to take under advisement requests by qualified service providers that reside in any of the townships. The disadvantage to the 4 units is if we take dollars off the top and distribute them, it's a 2-hit. Is one, they get their money right off the bat. So that first month they get those funds. And secondly, then we all share in the distribution of those funds. So the city and the county represent about 96, 97% of that. So in the city's case, every time we give dollars to a qualified service provider which reside outside the city has its own fire protection and police protection services, is we contribute around 48 cents of that dollar. So that's the disadvantage. The advantage to the townships is they don't necessarily have to max out their tax rate if they come and get it through us. So it's beneficial to them that they don't have to justify a tax increase. But the reality of it is, if the need's there, that was the reason it should be funded through those avenues. And you know, and that's what we're saying. What we from the city are saying is, especially in now, is with consolidation and their abilities to reset that tax rate, is they should be setting that tax rate in order to fully fund them. Now, I'll go with
Oh.
Jeff. They do get some lit money, distributive shares. And if we're going to take a hit, they're going to take a hit. And it looks like now that that'll be in 2022. Again, I'll say this is there's nothing that precludes any of the 4 units. If we let the monies go back to those 4 units without any additional funds going to these qualified service providers, there's nothing to stop any of those groups from granting any of those funds to provide funding to those qualified service providers inside their electorate. So the county could give money, the city could give money, Ellisville could give money, and Steinsville could give money as well. So it doesn't preclude the ability for those units. And personally, I think that's more appropriate, is let the monies fall. And these are outside the city. And I'm a Benton Township non-city resident, so I'm arguing against myself getting money for my fire protection. But I personally feel like, I should pay for that. I shouldn't expect that money to come from other people. So that.
Sure. And has that historically been that way for a number of years, or is that some wrinkle that has occurred in the last, 5-10 years?
Well, the public safety lit's a relatively new tax, and we've only adopted, I think this will be fourth or fifth year that we've done this, and I think, and we have allocated funds in each of those years to those service providers. And to follow up on that, and Jeff, jump in again if I correct me, but the townships themselves have to apply for these funds. So it's kind of a unique situation, is you're down to 2 or 3 service providers, and probably what we would see is like Northern Fire, or the Monroe County Fire District would present on behalf of a number of the townships that they represent. So eventually it'll be down to probably 2 of them, or 3 with the consolidation. So that the township asks for the money, we send the money to the township, and then they contribute it to the fire protection.
So thank you very much, Mr. Underwood. I appreciate that.
So,
Or wait,
wait a second, Mr. McKim, and then I'll get you, Ms. Gambaleuri.
I just wanted to clarify this. I haven't been on this committee before. Is it the fire department that applies, or is it the township itself that applies? Is it the fire?
It's the township on behalf of their certified provider, because under the current statute, the responsibility for providing that falls to the township level. It's just part of that old archaic constitution that we're under, where the townships still, have certain responsibilities. So even though they've contracted or joined a district, they still have to make the request.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Gambaleuri had a question.
And I feel like I should know the answer to this, and I don't, but what other opportunities will the townships have to increase their levy and their tax rate? Or was that just a one-shot opportunity when things consolidated?
That is one shot for each consolidation. And the consolidation changes the tax rate for all townships that are part of the district.
So if any.
So when Benton comes in to the district and has and the tax rate goes up for the district, it will go up for all the other townships that are part of this district.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to follow up on, again, this is part of the archaic township, is that each of the townships will continue to have their own tax rate related to fire protection services. So each one gets adjusted. So some are higher, some are lower, but over time they should kind of equal out. But because they're still set at the township level, you'll still see those rates for fire protection services by township.
Well, no, except that in the case of the fire protection district, right? That if they join the fire protection district itself, not by contract, but actually join the district, then the fire protection component of their township tax rate gets pulled out, and then instead those residents just become get the fire protection district rate. So like Perry Township and Clear Creek Township and Indian Creek Township no longer actually have a fire protection
Right.
rate in their township rate. They just get the fire protection district's rate. The ones who are on contract still
Pay.
have the township rate, and then they just and then they pay it in. So it does kind of depend on how exactly they get their fire protection.
Right. Yeah. And thanks for that clarification. Again, there'll still be a fire protection rate at the township level. So you'll still see that because tax rates are different for each jurisdiction. The other thing I'm not sure about that I want to check into as well, and I don't know, Jeff, if you know this or not, but some of these townships have cum cap for fire protection. I think they get to continue to keep those. I don't know that those get consolidated necessarily. So I know that's a separate component as well.
So I would like to answer that. It's my understanding that they keep the cumulative funds for building fire stations and for major equipment purchases. But I'd also like to know.
I don't remember.
I'd like to note that the townships that are not part of the fire protection district are paying into the public safety local income tax, just like the people in the city and the people in Steinsville and Ellettsville. Other questions or comments? Ms.
Isabel?
Piedmont?
Yes. So the tax rate can be increased at the point of consolidation, but if they're not at their maximum levy, they could also increase it at future points in time, can't they?
After they join the district, I don't believe so. For the townships that are not part of a fire protection district, they can go up to their maximum levy. And I don't have up-to-date information on all the townships that are not part of the district, but most of them operate very close to what's allowed year to year in the levy growth through the growth quotient.
But for a fire protection district or a fire territory, they cannot increase the rate after the consolidation has taken place?
They cannot increase the rate except as part of the growth quotient for that government entity, the district. Mr. McKim?
Yeah, now the territory was under their maximum levy. They could have gone up, but the territory is going away. So
yeah. Mr. Underwood, you had your hand up, I think.
I would just say, just to follow up on that, there is the ability for every unit of government to ask for an excess levy distribution, but it's rare that happens, and the DLGF tends to not award those. But I just want to make clear there is a process that you can make an appeal for additional, and it's typically if there's an error or extenuating circumstances that come up after the levy's been set, that you can ask for an excess levy appeal.
I think that's a very fair statement. You can ask, but you probably will not receive. So I've been through this with a township. Okay, other questions or comments about rural fire protection and funding for the QSPs? Well, I see none, and our agenda lays out that we are going to talk about a percentage of revenue. And does anybody have a recommendation that they would put forth as a motion for the percentage or the amount of revenue? Mr. Oldham?
I guess I'll be the one to voice it. I am very concerned about not having the adequate numbers and then trying to set a percentage, particularly when we're in the face of it. So I guess in the long run, I would be kind of in Jeff's camp as far as I think this year I don't really want to set a percentage and just tell them that there's probably not going to be a distribution beyond the city, county, Ellettsville, and Stein.
Mr. Sims?
And just to clarify my understanding, even if there's no decision on a percentage set aside, that they still have the right to apply for funds.
I'll let the lawyers handle
Yes.
that question, but that's my understanding too.
Thank you. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mike.
They legally have a right to apply. Mike, if you disagree, let me know.
No, that's right.
That kind of goes back to, I'm sorry, if we don't put a percentage out there, they can still apply. And if there's some overwhelming need, then this council can revisit funding that, as opposed to just putting a blanket, we're going to give you 3, 6, 9%, whatever it is. I think personally right now, since we don't know the overalls, for me, that's the safer play, because we may very well have one of the townships, one of the fire departments having an immediate urgent need that we can look at funding versus a blanket, here's 7% of the entire PS lit.
Mr. McKim?
I mean, I do think that that's a fair point, and I understand not wanting to commit to a particular percentage without better information, while there's still outstanding questions about timing and when we're going to have to make a decision versus what versus when we'll have the estimate. So I understand not wanting to get ourselves backed into a corner by locking onto a percentage. I'm going to continue to support allocation for the township fire departments, but I can understand why we might want to defer on picking a particular percentage right now. But I do think we need to be really open-minded to demonstrated need from the townships. And it sounds like from the comments I've heard so far, people are willing to be open-minded to that need.
If I may jump in really quickly, Committee Member Munson.
Yes.
Just to reiterate the point I made during our last meeting, the only reason you would want to try to be transparent with the townships ahead of time if a majority of the committee members are not interested in an allocation this year is simply to save them the time and effort, which again is something we've heard over and over again every single year from the townships, that there is a significant burden on them to complete all of this paperwork. It's really difficult given their limited resources to get that stuff in. So if we don't have an intention of doing distributions, it would be helpful to them to let them know now, given the June 30th deadline that's still there, that it's not worthwhile to submit paperwork. So that would be the reason you would want to try to get out ahead of it.
Thank you, Mr. Rocker. Mr. Oldham?
And Jeff, thanks for some of your comments that kind of rounded out what I was thinking. For a little history for those that are either new to this and or just for everybody as a whole in the public, a couple years ago, we were faced with a number of the fire departments having an absolute urgent, immediate need for air tanks and SCBA equipment that they couldn't fund otherwise, because normally there'd been a funding stream to them that got, for the most part, shut off. And that's when we had to take a step back and kind of look at funding everybody in the county at a certain level. So that's what I would advocate more at this point, rather than, like I said, that flat percentage and then letting them divvy up depending on what that is, making sure that we're taking care of a urgent, life-threatening need, as opposed to potentially just a flat percentage. So there's some historical perspective and precedence for allowing them to make their requests, because there may have been something come up out there none of us anticipated, including them.
I'm going to agree.
Mr. Smith, did you raise your hand?
I did. Thank you. I'm going to agree with Scott that it seems like not allocating is the safest play, and then that is whatever funds are available are left in reserve for some emergency. Does it also then that leads us to the townships, the units may go forward and adjust their own tax base if we say zero. Does that mean that it sounds like that may be their next move if we're saying zero?
Again, there's statutory requirements of when they can adjust their levies based on the consolidation. So without knowing exact schedules, I don't know that, we could say for certain that would give them a shot at the apple, another bite at the apple, but it would eventually they could come back and say in that last bite, which would be Benton and Washington Township, what is the tax rate they need to fully fund? So they're going to get that opportunity. It just may be a delayed opportunity.
Well, thank you. That's what I was wondering, if they would have the opportunity. Okay, thank you.
As Mr. Underwood said, it will be delayed. But meanwhile, they have to keep operating their fire and emergency medical services. So that's what I'm concerned about. Mr. McKim?
Well, Mr. Roker made the point that we don't want to make the fire departments go through a really onerous application process if there's no intention of giving them any money. Now, I've not, just based on the feedback I've heard here, I've not heard anyone here rule out their willingness to be open-minded about it. But then can we make the application less onerous? And I know that leads to the next agenda item, but are we asking for more information than we really need to make that decision?
Ms. Piedmont Smith?
Can I just clarify, Washington and Benton townships are joining the district in 2022 or 2021?
It won't be until 2022.
So that means at what point could the district, could they increase their tax rates?
They could vote to increase them in 2021 for 2022.
Okay, so that still leaves that 1 year, 2021, where they may not have additional funds.
No, because Bloomington Township will be coming in. So they'll get two bites of the apple. They'll get a 21 and a 22 chance because it's a staged consolidation.
Mr. Oldham.
Somebody help me out because I'm not sure for the two townships, Washington and Benton. Is the district under contract? Or are they under contract to the district for services, or who is going to provide services in the interim to those two? I mean, who's actually providing the physical service? And is it via contract or is it via membership? Because I know
I can talk about that. Benton has a volunteer fire department.
Right.
And then they contract, I believe it was with the Northern to back them up. So I assume it'll be Bloomington Township again for a year, and then they'll be in the district. So 2021 will be, for 2020, it's the Northern Fire District. For 21, I think it'll be Bloomington Township. And then 2022, they come into the district. So district.
No,
I'm going to clarify
I think they'd be in the, okay.
So I guess what we're doing with that.
Let me clarify for what Mr. Underwood just said. Washington will contract with the district. They're not contracting with Bloomington Township, but with the district. Because in 2021, Bloomington Township will have moved into the district. The same goes for backup with Benton Township.
So I guess where I was going with that is that contract is negotiated. It's not a capped level. So that if there is some downfall, upfall, whatever else, there's still some room to maneuver, much like Ellisville contracts with Richland contracts with Ellisville for services. That number moves around a little bit as far as the contract itself. So just thinking they're locked, well, those two that are outside really aren't locked necessarily, if I understand how the functionary is.
They're locked into what they can do with their budget for the next year.
Oh, understood.
Yes.
But as far as capped at, we can only spend XYZ percentage, it's not really that capped because it's a contractual service.
The contract is, but the contract has to come out of the fire fund
Exactly, yes.
for the township. So are there other questions or comments? Ms. Piedmont Smith?
Is there a motion on the table?
There is not.
Mr. Oldham, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess I will go ahead and at least put forth for discussion the motion that we start, as we have in years past, with a 0% and allow them to make application. Because again, historically, up until last year, we didn't set aside a set percentage. We always took applications and went from there. So yeah, that was my motion, is we start with the 0%, allow the qualified service providers to make requests as they have in the past.
Second.
Is there a sec? Thank you. Discussion on this motion?
Would we clarify? Oops, sorry.
Ms. Piedmont Smith?
I know that the next agenda item is to talk about the application process.
Mhm.
And I do agree with Mr. McKim that we should make the process as easy as possible and cut it down to just the essential information so that the QSPs don't have to spend a lot of time on something that may not reap the rewards.
Thank you. We'll deal with that after this motion. Comments or questions on the motion on the table? Mr. Lucas has his hand up, please.
I did want to remind the committee, I believe the agenda allows for public comment on this item and the application guidelines. So I don't know at what point the committee may want to take public comment. I see we've got a number of meeting participants that may have something to add, and just wanted to raise that as an issue.
Thank you, because I can't see that. Other questions from the committee? And if not, then we'll move to public comment. Do you have notes on that, Mr. Lucas, of somebody wishing to comment?
I've not seen anyone make a request, but if there are meeting participants that want to comment, you can use the raise hand function by clicking, I believe you click participant at the bottom of your screen, and then that should allow you to click raise hand, or you can just type into chat that you'd like to make a comment, and I will enable your audio.
Stephen, can I just clarify too for people who are present? The motion is to not set any percentage and let the QSPs submit applications, and then we'll just see what happens after that. Is that right? So the motion is sort of to do nothing.
Right.
It's not, I don't think it's do nothing. Mr. McKim.
Well, okay, so I guess I was just going to say, so if the motion is to do nothing, then there really isn't a necessity for a motion, right?
That's my thought, yes.
So, I mean, my inclination is if we're forced to vote, I'll vote no, just because I'd rather remain silent on a percentage until we have more information and just proceed with designing a more streamlined application.
Mr. Underwood?
And I'll let Mr. Oldham jump in, but I believe the motion was for a 0%, but let them apply. So I think there's a difference between not setting, saying it was not setting versus what he actually proposed, which was 0%.
What I'm actually proposing to make it easier is to take us back 2 years to where we had always been before that. And there's no set percentage to begin with for them to divide, as opposed to allowing them to make applications as they had in years past for urgent needs.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. I think we all got that. Mr. Lucas?
I believe, as contemplated on the agenda, a motion would be required if the committee wanted to affirmatively set a percentage. And so what Mr. McKim stated, I think, is correct, that no motion is needed if the committee's not affirmatively setting a percentage. So if the committee wants to go back to before last year, where the QSPs could apply, and then the committee made funding recommendations after that process. The committee doesn't necessarily have to vote on that motion. That process is already contemplated by the statute.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Piedmont Smith?
And I just wanted to explain why I wanted to get a motion on the table, and that was because normally public comment is on a motion, and I wanted to make sure the public had a chance to comment. But I understand now that we really don't need the motion, but I do want to have an opportunity for public comment.
So I think if everybody is okay, are we going to move with this motion, or is it going to be withdrawn? Mr. Sims?
I'm sorry, that was my exact question. Would we move forward, or would Mr. Odom withdraw that? And if not, it's a motion and it's been seconded and it's due a vote.
Well, I guess my question, sorry, is I'll be more than happy to withdraw it. I just thought we had to have something to move forward, but now I guess listening to the explanation, it makes sense. So I will withdraw it, with my preference being, as I stated, the 0 to begin with.
Thank you. I think we are back to where we need to be. So Mr. Lucas, did you have something?
Well, I'll just add that after, I see no public comment requests after our discussion here. So if folks did want to make a comment now, now's a good time to indicate that using either the raise hand function or sending a chat to the meeting host, but I've not seen anyone jump up to make a comment.
Thank you. We are ready to move on to the next agenda item then, and that is the application themselves. Do we have something about this, Mr. Lucas? Ms. Piedmont
Madam Chair,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to move to delegate the receipt, review, and recommended funding of applications to the Monroe County Council.
That's a motion?
Yes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion about this?
It seemed like that process went very well last year, and I appreciate the confidence that our city council partners have in the county council for doing that review.
Thank you for adding that, Mr. McKim. Mr. Sims?
And we all appreciate the confidences that have been expressed. I would support this because the county was the ones who took the applications and made certain recommendations. And as our colleague McKim says, it went rather smoothly. So I think this is basically formalizing, not to speak for Councilmember Piedmont Smith, but I would support this. I think it's formalized, and I think they're the best suited to do that.
Thank you. Other discussion? Mr. Lucas?
I just wanted to perhaps clarify what this committee hopes to get back from the county council if this delegation is approved. I believe last year when the committee set a set percentage, that was a known amount that the county council had to work within. And if this year there is no set percentage, is this committee simply asking for recommendations from the county council that this committee would then vote upon to recommend to the tax council? I guess I'm wondering how exactly it's going to work without a known percentage to offer a bound. Perhaps Ms. Piedmont Smith could clarify that.
Well, I think that based on our conversation during this meeting, the county council members sort of have an idea of where we stand, or where several of us stand, as far as funding only very urgent needs. And just based on that, they can make recommendations for funding in a certain amount and for certain purposes. And then I guess it would come back to this committee to evaluate that recommendation. Does that help?
I think that helps.
Yes, thank you.
the next part of our agenda after dealing with this motion is to look at the guidelines and application form. And I think the application form needs to really specify what this committee is willing to consider after the county council makes their review of applications. If there's no further comment, do you see any public comment, Mr. Lucas?
No, I've still not seen anyone indicate that they'd like to make a comment. Just for the benefit of the public, I believe this item, the next item, which is the review of the guidelines and application form, the committee's schedule, and any other business, those are all opportunities, or all will have opportunities for public comment. So if you know you'd like to make a comment on any of those items, you can let me know ahead of time and we can get you set up. But as of right now, nobody has indicated that they'd like to speak.
Thank you. Further discussion by the committee? If not, let's have a roll call vote then on the motion to, would you restate that, Mr. Lucas? That is the motion to not have a motion.
The motion to delegate the receipt, review, and recommended funding of applications from QSPs to the Monroe County Council.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas, do you want to call the roll?
I can, and I perhaps the county council members on this committee could speak. Last year, I believe this committee needed to make sure the county council was willing to take this on. I assume that that's not an issue this year, that the county council has contemplated this particular process in advance of today.
We haven't.
Generally, yes. And they were happy to do the work last year because they felt like they were closer to the fire departments and knowing their needs.
Okay. Well, with that, I will ask committee member Scambolari.
Yes.
Oldham.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Munson.
Yes.
And McKim.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, the application form and the guidelines for it. Do you have a presentation, Mr. Lucas?
I have last year's application form. At least I've got the form that was approved, I believe, by the committee before the process was turned over to the county council. I can display that, and I've also got the guidelines. One question this committee may want to discuss is whether it wants the county council to handle the application form. If the committee wants, we can review it here today. It may also make sense to allow the county council to adjust that form how it sees fit. So I don't know what the committee's preference is, but I do have last year's form that I can share if we'd like to go over it today.
Okay, Mr. Oldham has a question.
No, just a comment if I could.
Comment.
I think that that's more than appropriate. If the county council is going to be the one more or less weeding through these different applications, that maybe they should have a bigger say in how what information they're being provided.
Well, I think that could be done. So you're saying that the county would design the application form and the guidelines both?
I think the guidelines we need to probably discuss, but definitely the form as far as what you want to see to render a decision, since the council themselves is going to be the ones reviewing.
Well, I think by way of my own comment, that there are members of this committee who are looking for specific information. And I think it's important for us to know what committee members are wanting to see. So we should discuss this. Ms. Scambolari?
I'd like to suggest that we actually do go through the application. If there are issues that this group and this body doesn't feel strongly about and is willing to cede to the county council, those will go pretty quickly. And I think we could move through those. But applications are very foundational to this whole process. So it feels like we at least need to touch this base and go through it together. And if there are not changes, or if there are changes that we want to delegate to county council, it'll go quickly. So.
Thank you. Mr. Sims?
If we go through this process and the county has agreed to do that, it will be brought back to this community or committee for approval. Is that correct?
Right.
So it seems to me it's more efficient to just allow the process to go, understanding that they have maybe a different view than everyone else, being the county. And then they could bring it back, and then we could have questions of adjustment or additions or deletions with what they've created, which is probably going to be a pretty good document anyway, as opposed to try to piecemeal it this morning. Is that the process? I just want to be clear.
Thank you. For having the county council to meet and approve and send out this application is a little bit tricky, because the applications are due June 30th, and
Sure.
We are very late to the game.
That's true. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Mr. McKim, what are your thoughts?
And I'm sorry, let me know again, is that June 30th, is that the statutory deadline for the
Yes.
applications? Okay,
Yes.
that is. Yeah, that would be pretty difficult to, for us to be able to pull that off in time.
The county council won't meet until the fourth Tuesday of the month. That's way too late. So we're kind of stuck here.
And I do see a request to make a comment from Dustin Dillard. I don't know if the committee would like to take public comment at this time, or.
Thank you for bringing that up. Committee, what's your pleasure? Should we hear from Chief Dillard? Ms. Scamboluri?
Yeah.
That was a yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Would you invite Mr. Dillard in, Mr. Lucas?
I believe he's now unmuted and should be able to comment.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. So the statutory deadline is June 30th. Would it be acceptable to have a preliminary application that might be shorter? And then if the committee was going to entertain something, we could have a more detailed information obtained after the 30th?
That's a good one. That's potential.
Mr. McKim?
I mean, I like that a lot. I've seen that a lot in recent grant proposals where you do a letter of intent or something like that, and you don't have to do all the numbers and supporting detail unless it's unless you have a proposal that seems like it might be acceptable.
All right.
I like that idea.
Comply with the statutory requirements. That way.
Okay, I believe it would be best for this committee to outline what should be in a proposed letter of intent. And because the county council won't meet again until June 24th. Okay, Ms. Scamboluri?
May we just confirm with Mr. Lucas and Ms. Wright and Mr. Underwood that a letter of intent followed by a full application is acceptable? I mean,
So on your agenda is actually on the second page. I've copied the entire section of the statute that we're working under. And just on an initial reading, it states that a public safety service provider may, before July 1st of the year, apply to the adopting body for distribution of tax revenue. I don't think that there's any particular requirement for what that application looks like in the statute. Perhaps Mr. Rooker or Mr. Underwood can add anything if I'm missing something, but a pared down application that simply states, I think you'd want at the very least that the application or the applicant is qualified to apply under the statute, the amount that they're requesting, perhaps the purpose of their request. But if the committee wants to go through the application here today, I can display that, and we can strike out sections that you don't need initially and go from there. But yeah, I'd be happy to have Mike Rooker or Jeff Underwood add anything if I'm missing something.
Thank you.
I think that's probably correct. That would be legal. Again, though, just from a logistical perspective, the committee has to do work. And if the committee is delegating to a subgroup to receive applications and then is anticipating coming back and reviewing them as a bigger group and then deciding what percentage to set, and we have a September 30th deadline to make all of these decisions in the context of the dispatch budget, I would just a word of caution about giving QSPs maybe to sometime in August to submit. I would say you still want to get your forms in time to do your work, because you have a ton of work to do if we're going to do it the old way as opposed to the way we did it last year with some sort of distribution. So.
Yes.
Ms. Piedmont Smith.
Well, I wonder if this could be a weeding out process as far as their preliminary application could be accepted by the county council or the county council subcommittee, and then there could be, they would just make sure it's clear and that there are no big questions on the overall gist of the application. And then it would come back to this committee. And only at that point, if we decide that we do want to allocate money for one of these projects, then we could ask for a more comprehensive form to be completed. So not everybody who submits a letter of intent, so to speak, would be required to submit further details. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. If I don't know if you're waiting for a response from me, Isabel, or not, but just to be cautious about the amount of work that has to go into it after you finally get a complete application, just given the statutory deadlines that haven't been extended at this point. So.
Would it be helpful for me to display the current application at this time?
I'd like to get through this point of how we want to handle it, and then look at the application for things that, for points of information that members are particularly interested in, those that they are not at all interested in. I think that would be helpful. Ms. Piedmont Smith, we have a motion on the table.
We do?
No.
No, I don't think we do.
Oh, okay. It was, okay.
I wanted to suggest we go over the guidelines first before the application.
That's fine. That's fine with me.
Makes sense.
Either way. Mr. Lucas, you want to display the guidelines?
Just one moment. Is that visible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
So this was distributed in the committee's packet for the June 4th meeting, along with the application. And I can make any edits that the committee would like to make. Obviously, the date here will change if the committee approves these guidelines today.
Well, eligibility is a
per the
given.
statute.
Yeah,
Statutory.
don't change that.
Can you scroll down the guidelines, please, and show the
Yeah.
security? Thank you.
So I do have a comment about guideline number 2. I understand why it's there. but I disagree with it. And I'm the more and more, we work with nonprofit providers, and more we understand that staff is really what they need. And I get that, that they can never guarantee that any particular grant is going to continue on forever, and they have to manage that. But my personal preference would be to not privilege capital expenditures, and instead simply fund the need and allow the units or allow the fire departments to express and defend that need.
Cheryl, I don't know if,
I'm sorry, I can't see all of you.
I know, that's why I was going to just pipe up.
Thank you. Please pipe.
I think that this year is a little different, and I'm inclined to agree with Mr. McKim to not discourage applications for personnel, because we do have several fire departments that are in transition to becoming part of the fire district. And it may be in that transition period before the tax rates can be increased. They might have some personnel needs that can, in future years, be paid for with their own tax revenues. So I would not be averse to striking the highlighted phrase.
Thank you. Other comments on Ms. Gambaluri? I did catch you.
In an ordinary year, in other words, one without a pandemic and everything else, would we generally prioritize capital expenditures?
Yes, these are the guidelines for the
okay.
So
yes.
All this does is express a preference. And I guess I'm not necessarily, it doesn't preclude anyone from seeking assistance with something like personnel. And it seems like we could just move ahead with applications if it's intact. Again, if it were to preclude, if it were to say we will only look at capital expenditures, I would agree with Mr. McKim that that's an issue and we can rethink that. But this just seems to express a preference.
I guess I'm saying I don't even have that preference.
I can't raise my hand because I don't have a raise hand function or a video, but could I jump in very quickly?
Please jump in.
Thanks. I was just thinking about this, and I was trying to understand committee member Oldham's comments earlier. I thought that the idea was that it would be a one-time expenditure that demonstrated an extremely urgent need for funds. Yes. As opposed to relaxing this requirement, we would actually make it a lot stricter, was what I thought I heard the committee say earlier. But if that's incorrect, please let me know.
Well, I think a one-time commitment of funds for urgent purposes is correct. But that urgent purpose may be to fund a firefighter for 1 year.
I would agree with that.
I think so.
Perhaps that's the modification to that statement, that we need to put the language urgent need in there and change that statement a little bit.
I can support that.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps the committee prefers to fund expenditures for urgent needs.
Yes, and then the question is whether item number 6 is
works for me there.
Is redundant or unnecessary. I'm not even sure what that means, actually.
It's redundant. Redundant.
Delete number 6.
Mm-hmm.
In item 2, can we keep the one time? So prefers to fund expenditures for one-time demonstrated urgent needs?
I'm fine with that.
I mean, it's not very elegant, but
It's fine. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
As a quick aside, ladies and gentlemen, I have to leave the meeting. I apologize, but I've got another commitment I've got to be at. So I just don't want to disappear on here, but tell you that I have to go.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you,
Mr.
Scott.
Oldham, do you have a minute to state the information you were concerned to have in the guidelines or application?
Be honest with you, I am good with the guidelines as they were written, but I understand the council's or committee's changes, and I can support those. I do support
Okay.
the one-time distribution as opposed to a continuing thing. I don't want to get us committed to continuing to commit this, but there may be a very urgent need for whatever reason that we have not anticipated and doesn't fall under capital. It could fall under any number of different things. So I would be supportive of those changes. And quite frankly, in regard to Chief Dillard's comments, I think particularly the pre-application needs to be absolutely as simple as possible.
Yes.
And then we can dive into it if we're interested in funding that at all. So
Thank you.
again, thank you all, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Have a good day, Scott.
See ya.
Take care, Scott. Well, so one thought is that the pre-application could literally be these guidelines, could be
Exactly.
an application that just addresses these guidelines.
Yep. Yep.
But do we even need the dispatch runs? I mean,
Oh yeah, good point. That could be that could be one of the follow-up pieces of information. Although it looks like Stephen has a comment.
Well, I just wanted to add that the guidelines, while they might inform what the application asks for, these are ways to communicate to the QSPs what items the committee may be thinking about when making funding decisions. So simply stating that the committee may think about how many dispatch runs the provider made doesn't necessarily mean that the applicant needs to provide that. I don't know if Unified Central Dispatch provides that information or if it's available somewhere else, but I think you should make clear what the committee is going to be thinking about when deciding, who to fund and what to fund. So if you're going to be thinking about how many dispatch runs were made, I would suggest making that clear to the QSPs.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I would like to suggest in regard to dispatch runs, each of the fire departments keeps records on their runs, and sometimes they're not in good sync with dispatch. I would like to have us be able to look at the dispatch records for those units, rather than having each department have a separate reporting from their own records.
yeah, we have that in there.
By the Unified Central Dispatch.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're saying, Cheryl? Yeah, great.
Yes,
Yep.
I think we need to keep that
Nice.
because
Yep.
we've had confusion before.
So going back to, I think it was Mr. McKim or somebody said, or maybe Mr. Oldham before he left, that this set of guidelines could basically be the
Yes.
pre-application. So for that purpose, we would take out number 3, but so we can't just copy and paste this set of guidelines. We would need to adjust the language a little bit, but certainly the pre-application could address most of these items in broad terms.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did we decide to
Ms.
strike
Campbell-
number 6?
Yes. Yeah, strike number 6.
Okay. Ms. Gabelluri?
With the exception of striking number 6, which I think we should do, I think it makes the most sense to leave these guidelines intact, because guidelines are just that, they're guidelines. And they're a way for the committee to express preferences. And perhaps the quicker way and the more efficient way to do this is to go through the application and, again, X out those things that we don't feel we need during the letter of intent phase. As I look through the application, I think there's some pretty huge chunks of it that we don't need to know during the expression of intent. And I think crossing those out may be fairly simple once we get to it.
Other questions or comments?
Now, the guidelines look good for a preliminary application.
Well, I think the guidelines are the guidelines for the application throughout the process. The question is what
Right.
information we need to request at the beginning versus supplementary information to gather at the end. But would we want to vote on the guidelines? Is that as amended? Is that
Okay. I think we need to specify these are guidelines for the QSP application process in general. Is that correct?
Preliminary applications.
Or is this for preliminary only?
No, it's for review of all the applications.
I think it's for
Yes.
the application process. We're not going to have another set of
Good.
guidelines.
Right, that's what I think.
Okay.
So,
Would you
I
like?
move that we adopt this revised set of guidelines for the application process.
Second.
Second,
thank you. Any discussion on this motion?
No.
Is there any public comment? Mr.
Not
Lucas,
seeing
would you
anyone.
go ahead?
I've not seen anyone indicate that they'd like to make a comment, but if you do have something to add, please either raise your hand in the Zoom with raise hand function or send a chat to the meeting host and maybe give it a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I can pull up the guidelines again if we need to have that, but I think everybody saw the changes. I see no public comment.
Thank you. Let us have a roll call vote on this motion, please.
I'll start with Committee Member McKim,
yes?
Munson,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
yes.
and Skimblary. Okay.
So thank you. Next, I believe we want to review the application and identify which elements are important for the, is it for the pre-application process?
And just to make sure that we're in keeping with the statute, we might want to adjust our terminology and call this the application, since they are supposed to apply by the statutory deadline. And then we could have supplementary information or something like that that's requested at a later time.
I think that's a great idea.
And toward that end, may we include language, may we invite our attorneys to add language to this first section, just as it says you may be eligible to request funds. Additional information may be required for the final, before final awards are made.
I'm happy to delegate that to the attorneys.
Me too.
I'm happy to delegate many things to the attorney.
And I'll add that, attorneys for the county council are more than capable of also working on these instructions before the actual application. I've not updated any of this language, but it may need to be adjusted given the timelines that we're working with. And as council or committee members have pointed out, the supplemental information that may be requested.
And a question, does this go to applicants as a PDF that they fill in? Is it that straightforward?
Good point.
I'm not actually sure how it's been sent to qualified service providers in years past, but we can certainly make it as easy as possible this year for them to fill in.
I think it looks like these could all be a fillable fields in a PDF. I mean,
Yeah.
does the committee want to go through? So I suppose setting the initial instructions at the beginning of the application aside, if the committee's comfortable with the respective attorneys correcting that information given the process this year, I can go through the actual questions.
Okay.
I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I assume that we'll want information about who the applicant is and their contact information to remain. Oh, and I'm getting a message from Dan Sherman that past applications have had fillable fields for the applicants, so we'll continue that this year.
This is all just demographics, so I would suggest we proceed. So.
Yeah.
This question about eligibility, just from my perspective, I think should remain. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate on the part of the QSP, but an explanation of why they're eligible, I think, is important for the committee to have. We have had instances in the past, I believe, Dan Sherman can correct me if I'm wrong, where we've had ineligible applicants, and the committee would want to know why they're eligible to request funding.
May I suggest that we include just a parenthetical comment at the end saying 100-word maximum or something like that, just to see what kind of a response we're looking for. In other words, we're not looking for an epic tome. We just want to understand how you fit into this. So could we include some language like that?
Yeah, and this really should be pretty straightforward. I mean, this is just, you know, we serve such and such a township by contract, blah, blah, blah.
Is a maximum 100 words sufficient?
Should be.
I would think so.
I would hope
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good idea.
So do we need, you may continue on an additional sheet of paper?
No.
I think we don't need that.
No.
Delete that, please.
Get
Please
that
do
out of
not
there.
continue. Yeah, please do not continue on an additional sheet of paper.
You know, and I don't know why, I imagine this was added originally to offer these applicants the space they need to explain any special situations that come up. So I certainly understand wanting to communicate to the applicants that they can be brief and they don't need to go on and on. But if there is a need to explain, and it may not matter this much because the committee's so familiar with, I think, who the qualified applicants are. Just a word of caution on putting limits on it.
If that were the case, perhaps we could include an open field at the end saying any additional information you feel you need to have at this point, period. And leave it, and that could be anything on anything in the application. So but I would agree, this is pretty straightforward. I don't think we need to make this harder than it already is. So.
Okay. Any other changes to this eligibility question?
No.
Mr. Sims has his hand up.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I don't know if it fits right here or not. I'm trying to look. But considerations for 2021 demographics for any other pending mergers. Because I think we have a couple that are pending that will change some of these things for next year's application, with the exception of Washington and Benton, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Well, so basically you're saying we should ask them if there are any pending changes.
For an example, between you and the political subdivision you serve. And obviously if there's mergers, that changes. For an example. So is that something we need to consider and maybe
I think so.
Quantify?
I think so.
Yeah. Right at the end, there's item Roman numeral 9 that says consolidation of services. But yeah, I think we should ask up front about this, since it does go along with the previous item.
And if I may, I hate to be rude, but like Odom and others, I have another appointment on the other side of town that I need to prepare and get ready to leave for. So thanks everyone for their participation. I look forward to reviewing the remaining changes today.
Thank you.
Bye, Jim.
Glad to be a part of you guys. I'm glad to be a part of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you.
You too.
So did I hear a suggestion to perhaps move this question about consolidation of services?
Make the number numeral 2.
Mhm.
Good thought.
Some of the
Does it
format.
have to be so long? I mean,
I would love to just fill in the blanks.
that is a lot to read.
Can you scroll down to the red language, the language in red? Thank you.
I may need to fine tune some of the formatting after today.
Perhaps we could leave it to the attorneys to simplify that language. If we oversimplify it, we might leave something out, and I trust the attorneys to catch that.
Well, maybe we could just start with, please describe your plans to combine your
Yeah,
plans, if any, to combine services with other providers. We don't need all this. The committee wants to
Yeah.
know. Well, obviously we want to know. That's why we're asking.
That's a very good point.
Right. If you are ready to discuss them, I don't think that's
no, they have to be
particularly
ready.
helpful. Yeah, they have to be ready at this point.
How do you feel about this? Kidding.
Please attach your emoticons at the end.
Yeah, I think you can probably get rid of that middle sentence in addition. I don't know if you need that.
You just describe your plan. I think describe your plans is really,
Yep,
that first sentence is really what we're asking.
yep.
The only thing that captures is the timeline, which I
I
think is
would.
valuable.
I
Well,
think,
no, actually, we could take that out because we say, please be specific if any merger activities in 2021 could impact the project.
Right. So the middle sentence is unnecessary.
It's lovely, but it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Amount, breakdown, explanation of request. Seems fairly straightforward and fairly simple.
Mhm.
Yep.
Now, for the preliminary application, do we really have to have three or four charts of categories? Can we just have one chart and say, what is it and how much money? I
I would
mean,
appreciate
this is a preliminary application.
Yeah, I would appreciate the category it's in. So if we were to say we would like funding for
Right.
item A, it's personnel, here's how much. We would like funding for item B, it's other services and charges, here's how much.
Okay, but just one
Okay.
table.
Yeah.
And they could put
Just
the
one
category in
table.
it.
Good idea.
One table listing the 4 categories and a total.
I'll have to work on that after the meeting.
Good.
Perfect. Thank you.
So just to clarify, you'd like to combine these category tables into one table and allow them to indicate the category and the amount of the request
Yes.
And the purpose.
and the purpose. Yes. And before we get too far, it may be useful to, I will make any of these changes that we agree on here today. I would suggest delegating to perhaps the committee chair any additional cleanup, just because we're doing this kind of quick and fast, and because the committee chair is also serving on the subcommittee that will review these applications. It might be useful to delegate any final cleanup that needs to happen to her.
I have no problem with that.
Sure. Good
Of
idea.
course,
I'll delegate it.
none of you have any problem with it.
Great idea.
Well, I just
do
want to
that.
avoid, like Cheryl and Jeff, I think, expressed, you know, getting a body like this together to make these edits is cumbersome. So while we're here today, we can do this. But if there's anything that comes up, it's useful to have an individual that can make those decisions. So any edits to I think the new number 4 here?
Could this be simplified to say something like maximum of 200 words or maximum of 100 words? Because again, during this initial phase, we're not looking for an epic, you know, but we do want to give them an opportunity to explain why something's essential in case we don't understand why.
And also maybe the word prudent to urgent, since we're.
Yes, urgent.
Very good. Good catch.
Do we want 200 words or just 100? That's
100. It should be enough.
100 would be lovely.
Make it consistent with the other one. Yeah.
For partial funding for the next item, I don't know that we need them to spell that out at this stage, but maybe we could just include a statement somewhere in this document saying it is possible that the tax council may wish to approve partial funding. Please be aware that we may ask for supplemental information on how you want stuff prioritized.
Yes, that
but I
sounds
agree. Yeah, this could definitely be struck though from the application, I think.
So I think having looked at the applications each of these years, that knowing priorities of the service providers is very important because they all have, they've always presented us needs that far exceed what the PS-LIT can cover. So Ms. Piedmont-Smith?
Well, then I would say in item 3, they should just list them in order of priority.
That's true. We could add language up there, you know, list in priority order, please.
Fair enough.
Yeah, excellent. And just get rid of the partial funding then.
Right.
Very, very nice.
And I mean, we've already said we might come back to ask for more information. I don't think we need to specify that about partial funding, really. With all due respect, Ms. Scambolari.
Noted. No? Makes sense. I'm inclined to defer to my colleagues on significant sources of revenue and whether or not that's needed at this stage.
I mean, so my take is that section B, we might want to include. So if this is part of a joint, you know, an application for other funding sources, that's useful to know. But if just funding for their overall departmental services, we can get that from Gateway. That's the whole point of these DLGF systems is write once, read many.
But I would comment on this that the committee will not want to go do the work of looking up the information if they want to consider that. So the applicant should provide it.
Even in this preliminary, even in this stage of the application,
this is their overall budget.
Yeah, it just seems like this is something that we can pull out of, you know, for at least any of the taxing units. Well, okay, all right. So maybe not for the Bean Blossom.
I wonder, can we be?
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. You actually raised your hand.
Yes, but I didn't wait to be called on. So in this, asking about revenues, I mean, I think the question we're trying to get at is, okay, you've outlined your need of what you know, your urgent needs. Why can't you pay for this yourself? I mean, isn't that what we're trying to get to? Is there some more direct way to ask that? Something like, please explain why your other revenue sources are insufficient to cover this urgent need? or something like that?
I think that is very much preferable.
I mean, we don't need to get into all of like, I don't think anybody wants to review every single budget of every township.
Right.
We just
Right.
want to know
Thank you.
why they need our money.
Well,
Excellent point. Excellent.
Yeah, yeah. And you just want a comment box there?
I don't even know, Stephen,
Mhm.
about most appropriate source. I mean, then we argue about appropriateness. I think
What is appropriate?
why are you asking,
Oh,
or why do you need?
Appropriate.
Necessary instead of appropriate.
did we say what?
A necessary source of funding. Yeah. There we go.
Good.
Wordsmithing on the fly here, so I can insert text box 100-word limit.
Yeah.
Yes.
I might give them more words.
How many words do we give them?
150.
105.
I mean, if anybody's tried to write a letter to the editor, you know how fast the words go.
They do.
That's true. That is true.
Yep.
Those of us who are recent candidates and have had to fill out all the questionnaires from
Yes.
community groups.
Teaches you to be concise.
Mhm.
So does that, do you want to strike?
Yeah, let's, I think we need to look at part B in conjunction with this.
But yeah, yes, Stephen, I think you're striking A. Right?
Yeah, because we do want to know about if they have applied to other sources.
Should the text box, agreed, and should the text box above, please explain why PS lit funding is necessary? It seems to me that should follow B.
I think so too.
Yep. Good point. Yep.
Good.
Could we just leave this out, leave out Roman numeral 6 for now?
Yeah, I don't think it's
I don't
needed at
see
this
it.
stage.
Agree.
Okay.
I understand the importance of Roman numeral 7 in like a full-blown detailed application is, to Mr. McKim's point, isn't that something we can also look up pretty easily?
No,
Okay.
No?
I don't think so because of the specifics. If they ask for and receive funding for certain purchases, we would not necessarily see that in the supplies category. Reports from out of our financial reports.
Well, so wait, so the point of this whole question is just,
Did you
properly execute this grant if you received it in the past? Is that what did you buy what you told the public you were going to buy?
Yes.
This is just a wordier way of saying that.
Yeah.
So is there a simpler way of saying it? I mean, part of simplifying this application is to make it shorter. So even if we could just do this in one question, like if you got funds last year, have they been spent for the purposes for which they were given, or are there plans to spend them for that purpose before the end of 2020? Why or why not? That way we have 3 sentences rather than, half a page.
Yep.
Yes, I would say delegate the wordsmithing of this to staff, but with
Yes.
I think we've been clear about what it is we want to know.
I think that's good.
I will take a crack at that. And again, I think delegating the final decision to the committee chair on the application would be helpful, just so that I'm not the one making the final call. I think I understand the committee's intent with this question.
Make it simple.
Seems like we've covered this elsewhere, or am I imagining that?
Well, this is specific. So we've asked them to identify what political subdivisions they serve. This one is just a statement of support from the governing body of the political subdivision. But it seems like that doesn't have to be part of this application, that we, before funding, we could get.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Because they're probably not even going to have time to have a meeting of the township board anyway.
Yep.
They will not. Just public notice requirement.
When we moved this above.
Yeah, we were.
We did.
Item 10, it seems like, is not necessary for the first stage either.
I agree. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Or limit it to 10 words.
Long range plans equals put out fires.
Right. Yes, that's
And
right.
save people.
Yeah, save lives and put out fires.
So this
So
is
we
the end
don't
of
need
the
those
application.
additional documents at this stage, do we?
I don't think so.
No.
No.
And do we need to differentiate? In a way, we've already done it, but there's a difference, I think, between an entire operating budget and a project budget. The budget for just whatever it is that you're funding for. Maybe that's a differentiation we can make in the future if we need to.
Okay. So before we move on to something else, I would like to ask Mr. Lucas to save the file that you're currently editing, so we know exactly what was deleted, and we may need to refer to that in our request for additional information.
I will absolutely do that. And Mr. Sherman's sending me a note about the timeline, given the fact that we don't know about any extensions of our work by the state quite yet. Depending on how this kind of two-stage application process is going to work, notice will need, if any of the QSPs are funded, notice has to go out to the taxing entities so far in advance of any funding resolution. And because we need to get that resolution done before the end of August, that puts a funding resolution sometime in the middle of August. And for this committee to review the Monroe County Council's recommendations.
Before that.
So we may need to think backwards, and we can talk about this when we get to schedule, but I just wanted to kind of put that in everyone's mind while we're talking about two kind of stages of this application. So let me pull up the application just one last time. If the committee wants to vote to approve this as amended and also delegate any final editing to the committee chair in consultation with legal staff, I think is maybe the best way to approach this.
Is that
So
one
moved.
motion? Second.
Wait, what's the motion?
To approve this edited.
Approve the application.
That's amended and to delegate
Right.
staff final refinements to the language as needed.
To the chair.
To the chair.
To the chair, sorry.
That was a motion from Ms. Scambaluri.
Kind
Second.
of started with Jeff, but I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion by the committee about this motion? Mr. Lucas, would you check for public comment?
If any folks want to make a comment, you can use the raise hand function or send a chat to the meeting host, and I will recognize you. Don't see anyone making any comments.
Thank you. We are ready then for a roll call vote.
Committee member Scambaluri?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Munson?
Yes.
McKim?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Thank you for that. And I will send both the edited application once I've been able to make those changes along with the deletions, so that I don't know if the committee wants to talk about when it's going to get that kind of second wave of information, or let the county council handle. I don't know how the committee wants to handle that.
So I think we're moving into schedule, and it would be helpful to have a calendar, and I didn't prepare one for this because I didn't quite see where this was going to go this morning. Can we backtrack in terms of the dates that we believe we are working with?
And I will just have to let the committee know that I have to leave at 10 o'clock. So if
You
there's
have to
anything
leave
that
at 10.
needs my vote, then let's do it before then. But I support whatever calendar the committee
comes up with. Well,
I'll
this
work with
is also something we could leave to the staff to work out with the chair, if that would be preferable to you, or would you like to have more input on options?
I'm happy to delegate personally.
I agree.
Yeah, it's fine.
Could we have a motion to that effect, please?
Move to delegate to staff the preparation of a draft schedule for future meetings. And
Second.
Wait, the preparation of a draft schedule, you mean to be then sent out to members for approval via email, or
I don't think we
set the schedule
just to
in
set the schedule.
consultation with the chair?
With the chair, yeah, that's probably
what I
important.
just said, move that we delegate to staff in consultation with the committee chair the creation of a schedule for future meetings.
I second that.
Second. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Great motion.
Good
Any
motion.
discussion? Mr. Lucas?
And just to throw another wrench in things, we'll also need to factor in the schedule for the PSAP budget. I think Mike Rooker is still on the call, but as of last week, they hadn't, the dispatch policy board hadn't yet met to make a recommendation on that budget. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and given the kind of compressed timeline we're working in this year, just be prepared that unless the state grants some extensions, there may be a lot of work coming up.
Well, all the more reason to delegate to you on those pieces.
So, Ms. Piedmont Smith?
I would just suggest, as soon as the draft schedule is released to the committee members, that committee members, not replying to all, but replying just to Mr. Lucas, indicate whether or not they can come to the meetings to make sure that we get a quorum.
Very good.
Certainly.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Is there any public comment? Mr. Lucas sees none. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Committee member Smith,
Yes.
McKim,
Yes.
Scamboluri.
Yes.
Munson,
Yes,
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
thank you, everybody. So our next work item is other business. Does anybody have any other business to bring before the committee? Overwhelming silence.
That would seem to be a no.
So is there interest to move toward adjournment?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you. Committee, we are adjourned, and I thank you for your time this morning. And we will meet again. We don't know when, but Mr. Lucas will be advising us.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Thank you all.
Thanks,
all very
everybody.
much. Have a good morning.